Bellingham City Council committee meetings this afternoon on September 14th. We have several committees today. The first committee is Public Works, Public Safety, and Terry Borneman is the chair.
Thank you, Gene. We have two items on our agenda today. Joining me on the committee is Michael Lillquist and Roxanne Murphy. The first item before us today is Woodstock intersection improvements and impacts to Sunset Pond Park. Ted.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Ted Carlson, Public Works Department. This is related to the James Street improvements, more specifically the Woodstock-James Street intersection improvements. And I've put on the overhead here a vicinity map that shows where we're talking about. James Street, Woodstock, where Woodstock Way intersects with James Street, just south of Sunset Pond. And what is before council today is really just a part of the public process. Whenever a federally funded transportation project encroaches onto specific identified park property, which is the case with this project, a requirement of the Transportation Act is that we look at those impacts on the park property, and in this case go through a process to determine that those impacts are de minimis, that the impacts are not great to the park property, and in this case will actually be, as part of the intersection improvements, we will encroach onto about 0.3 acre of park property, but at the same time we'll be improving a trail that currently dead ends and providing some connectivity from that trail into the main Sunset Park area. So in the packet is the process that we need to go through with WSDOT. The Department of Transportation actually created a form that you can go through asking specific questions where the answers related to the transportation project can be used to, in fact, determine whether or not the impact is very minimal to the park property or being properly mitigated. Also in your packet is a letter from Parks Director James King agreeing that in this particular case, while we are encroaching onto the park property, it's very minimal in nature and in fact will help improve some of the pedestrian connectivity. So I wanted to show you exactly where on this vicinity map we're talking about. Right in that area, that intersection, what will happen with the James Street Woodstock Way project is, I'm sure you're all familiar with the traffic pattern there now. The through movement is really James Street, and it's a very awkward intersection with the way Woodstock comes into James Street. The improvement will create a new intersection alignment that will have Woodstock Way be the through movement. So if you're, let's say you're northbound on James Street, currently you have to go through the Sunset Mall area. It's a little bit challenging to get through there, and you come out at the intersection there where Barclay comes in on the south side to Sunset. Once the improvements are done, if you're southbound on James Street, you'll continue, make the movement onto Woodstock Way, which will take you over to Orleans, which is a little bit better intersection for that movement, getting you out on the Sunset Way. So this is a project that is scheduled for 2016. And again, part of the process today is to show that we presented this in a public setting, have the minutes that can be put into the file to meet the requirements of the Transportation Act, and certainly answer any questions that the council might have about the impacts to the Sunset Pond Park.
Questions, comments? Jack.
Is there going to be any intersection improvements or signaling improvements over on Sunset and Orleans? Because it seems like right now traffic really does stack up quite a bit on southbound Orleans. It actually wraps around onto Woodstock, and this improvement, which is I definitely support, just seems like it's going to put more and more stress on that intersection.
Yeah, it's a good question. It certainly will put more volume onto that movement on Sunset. So no physical improvements as part of this project at that intersection, but certainly evaluating the timing of the signals. We'll probably need to allot more green time to that movement at Orleans on the Sunset, but that's certainly something that we'll need to watch, because you're right, it will change the traffic pattern. We think it's for the better in terms of how Sunset functions, and certainly will will alleviate some of the challenges at the current James Street, Barclay, Sunset intersection.
Michael?
I also support this project, and when I'm done, I'll make a motion, or maybe you can to that effect. But thinking about this and about the Orchard Street connector that we're planning, at this point, how much more traffic do we expect to go through this particular intersection? And will we mostly northbound or southbound? Will it mostly be heading to Bakerview or under the highway? I'm just wondering, you know, in the end, how do we think the traffic will flow through this port? Both ways equally?
I don't know that I can answer that. We can certainly come back. We have modeled the intersection, so I know we have some forecasts in terms of how the future volumes will flow through this area. Certainly with the Orchard Street connection, as with this change in the through movement on Woodstock, and we can get that to council. I don't want to speculate right now because I can't remember the numbers, but I do know that when we look at the Orchard Street Birchwood connector, it does reduce traffic. It does reduce it adds capacity to the Sunset interchange as well as to the Meridian interchange by taking some traffic off of those two interchanges, so that movement over to the west side of the interstate can happen underneath the interstate rather than via those overpasses. Let me see what we have in terms of volume forecast, and I can have that tonight.
Yeah, it really is kind of the Sunset I'm more worried about.
Okay.
I would move
I think it's information only.
Oh, information
Michael.
only? Never mind then.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, anything else on that? Yes, Dan.
I'm just looking at page 7 of the packet, and provides a little more level of detail than the graphic, and it looks like the intersection, the improvement from James to Woodstock brings the road much closer to Sunset Pond. I'm just wondering how close it would be to that's the one.
Yeah, so you can see what it does is it creates a, here's the Woodstock movement now as proposed. I mean, that's what the proposed movement will be. And you can see it realigns James Street and brings it into a T there. So it clearly identifies the through movement as, James to Woodstock rather than the through on James. It doesn't necessarily it does encroach a little bit towards the pond, and that's part of the need for the amount of park property. There'll be a retaining wall there. There's currently a culvert for Squalicum Creek. That's where Squalicum Creek currently goes underneath James Street, which will now be rerouted, or is currently being rerouted under the new bridges just to the north there on James that were installed last year. So a little bit of encroachment to the south, but pretty minor, and does allow us to make some improvements for that park trail.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. No. Thank you, Ted. And the next item up is the bid award for the Lincoln Street sidewalk improvements.
Thank you. Last week, or at your last meeting, I'm sorry, we brought to council a revised interlocal agreement between the city, WTA, and Western, the funding partners, along with money from the State Transportation Improvement Board for this sidewalk work along Lincoln. On the overhead here is a vicinity map. The improvements will be between Byron and Maple Street. We did go out to bid. We recommend award to Faber Construction. They were the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. I did mention at the briefing last time that the project did exceed our original project budget. We went back to Western and were successful in getting an additional $50,000 from them, but will also be an increase on the city's Transportation Benefit District funding. There is money in the 2015-16 biennium for that. One reason for that is a delay to another project, the West Maplewood project, which we had originally identified for construction in 16, using Transportation Benefit District money to match Safe Route for School money. We actually didn't find out about the Safe Route to School money until a month or two ago. Too late for us to complete design and get it constructed in 2016. That project has subsequently been moved to 2017 simply due to the timing of the funding. So again, there's money in the biennium, and staff recommends that council award this project to Faber Construction.
Well, I just move that we award the bid for the Lincoln Street sidewalk improvements to Faber Construction.
Okay, we got Jack.
Ted, what's the primary reason for the bid to come in so much over the engineering estimate?
Two reasons, really. One was an increase in the scope of the project. We talked a little bit about that at the Public Works Committee meeting, last council meeting, or the last date. We added street lighting. That wasn't in the original bid, but certainly made sense given the proximity to transit facility that we add the street lighting. That was one reason we went back to Western, because the street lighting really would be a requirement of the university when they develop the park and ride facility. So that was the basis for the additional $50,000 from Western, was to fund the street lighting. And the other component of it really, I think, is a reflection of the current bidding climate. We're seeing, especially with some of our sidewalk work, that we're seeing higher bids come back. I mean, contractors are very busy, and we're seeing that reflected in the bid. So I think it's really those two reasons.
Thanks.
Michael?
Now that I think of it, I do have a little informational question. This is for a sidewalk project. I'm wondering if we're planning on putting the sidewalk directly next to the curb, or whether there'll be one of those little green strips. And also, this will be a pervious sidewalk, so it'll have stormwater aspects to it. How much more expensive, kind of on a percentage basis, is putting in the pervious sidewalks, and how much do you save, hopefully, on the other end in terms of stormwater facilities?
Yeah, it's a good question. It will be a setback sidewalk. There will be a planter strip and street trees planted, but I'll turn it over to Sam Ship, the engineer, on it to answer the more specific questions.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sam Ship, Public Works Engineer. Regarding stormwater, with the pervious, we don't have to build detention and so forth like a vault or a tank. And so therefore, it's relatively less expensive than going through the process of finding property and putting a tank in the right-of-way. So it's generally, in this case, a little bit less money.
So overall savings, that's great, thank you,
Yeah.
I'm glad. Can you just say roughly how much more expensive any linear foot of sidewalk is pervious or are we like a 5% premium, a 2%, or can you say?
Well, we could look into that and get back to you if you'd like.
Just out of curiosity, thanks.
Okay, anything else? Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion before us. All those in favor, answer aye.
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 Aye. Okay, we will recommend approval tonight. End of committee.
Thank you, Terry. We got a couple minutes before we need to start.